Welcome to the Cinematic Flashback Podcast. Get ready to hop into the Wayback Machine as we journey through the wild, bold, and unforgettable films of the 1970s. Each episode will break down a classic movie or forgotten gem by exploring the who's who of each film, diving into the premise and plot, and see how it performed then and now, and wrap things up with, did it groove through the decades or lose its beat? Today we're heading underground with a ticking clock thriller full of gunmen, grumpy New Yorkers, and a citywide chaos. It's The Taking of Pelham 123. Joining me on this commute today is Matt Sargent. Matt, it seems like it's been a hot second since we last recorded together.
Yeah, we've had some vacation time and some time off, and so it's good to be back in the saddle.
We're talking Taking of Pelham 123. At a high level, what is this movie about?
So this movie is about the hijacking of a subway, and it was based on a novel, as I believe.
And the name Pelham 123 comes from when a subway train leaves its originating station. It uses that name, which would have been Pelham Station, and the time, which would have been 1:23 in the afternoon.
Yeah, I did not know that. I, for years, have thought this referenced Pelham 123 as like stations 1, 2, 3 in Pelham. You know, so I had no idea what that meant. So that was cool for me to learn that. And then this is something we were talking about last night with my family, is we were talking about naming of the trains. And they're like, well, wait a minute, you just get on the blue line or you get on the... I'm like, yeah, that's just whatever train is coming on that line. But when they're trying to conduct the actual trains that are running down the tracks, there'll be several of them. They have to identify each and every one of them. So that's how they identify them. The station they're leaving from and the time they're scheduled to leave. So Pelham 123 is the train that left Pelham, scheduled at 1:23.
We got to see a lot more about kind of the behind the scenes of how subway systems run. It seemed to me that there was like this hierarchy. So there was like a main central control station, and then there were more localized control stations. Did you know that?
Well, no, I didn't know that, but it makes perfect sense, because if you were running the world's largest subway system, as they, you talk about in the film, they actually cover that New York City subway system at the time was the world's largest. That would only make sense to be able to deal with managing something so big.
And the last thing that I had never really quite drew all the lines together, because where we live, we don't have a large transit system. I never really understood what the transit authority was, but also that they have their own policing units.
Yeah, no, I did know that, because we have, my wife's family is all from New York and Connecticut and up in that area. So, through the years we visited, and so we've been pretty familiar with the idea that the transit authority runs all the transit. That includes ferries, the buses, the subways, and light trains and stuff like that. And they do have their own policing system for that, because it's a specialized kind of policing they do on the transit authority. But they do work in close conjunction, and we saw that in the movie where they were trying to coordinate, and some things went right and some things went wrong in that coordination. But I think that was very realistic. I learned a lot. Kind of hilarious that you really get steeped in New York accents. Everybody has got a Bronx accent or Uptown, or all these New York accents, and it is so fun to listen to it. And I cannot imagine someone like from England watching this movie and just going, what are they saying?
This was the first time that I had watched this film. I found it to be very exciting, and it made my 3-hour flights go by like really, really fast. How about you? Had you seen this film before?
I had not seen it before. I don't know why I hadn't seen it. I guess it's one of those ones that just didn't seem to interest me. But
did you know about it?
Yes, I did know about it, but it was one of those ones I knew about, but I just sort of like, it didn't seem interesting to me, and I was wrong. I gotta say, I'll just say it right out of the book. I was wrong. This is a great movie. I know we always do this at the end of the film, but I can't contain my excitement. This was a fun. Yes, it's a thriller. Yes, there are there's very stressful points, but there's also some very judiciously used comedy to kind of break the tension. It's just like I think you described before we started, it's a tight movie. It's tight. Yeah. There's no fat. It's 100% believable, right? And people react in what I would say is 100% realistic way. I really enjoyed it.
I found it to be a very efficient script. I found the film to be smart.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and play that trailer.
1:23 p.m. A crowded subway train starts its run from Pelham Station in the Bronx. 1:45 p.m. Four desperate, heavily armed men seize control of the train.
Open the door or I'll blow your head off.
Taking 17 people as hostages.
Your attention, please. Now then, you'll all remain seated. Anybody who tries to rise is going to get shot. I do hope I have made myself understood.
2:13 p.m. The city of New York is given 1 hour to come up with $1 million ransom.
You're out of your skull.
All units stand by on the double.
What's up, Z?
The train's been hijacked.
Millions have read it. Now you can live it. The Taking of Pelham. 1, 2, 3.
There is no way you can get away with this. You are underground in a tunnel.
At precisely 3:13, we are going to begin executing the hostages. Nothing will happen as long as you obey my orders.
New York City is held powerless in the grip of 4 ruthless men. From the mayor's office
Don't tell me I don't want to know.
to police headquarters
I've got about 50 men inside the tunnel, all wearing vests and armed with machine and submachine guns. We can fight the Third World War down there.
to the nerve center of the world's busiest subway system.
My only priority is saving the lives of these passengers.
Maybe an hour isn't enough time.
An hour is plenty of time. We agreed to pay the ransom. Repeat, we agreed to pay you the money. Now turn your clock off. The money has to be counted, stacked, tied, transported uptown. It just isn't physically possible.
You'll be surprised what's physically possible.
Pelham 123's in motion.
How long does it take to get all that money together anyway?
Just not gonna make it.
We'll never make it. The passengers are dead ducks.
What the hell they expect for their lousy 35 cents to live forever?
Walter Matthau, Robert Shaw. The most spectacular hijack in history. The Taking of Pelham. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, Matt, let's go ahead and get into talking about the cast and crew. Tell me a little bit about Zach Garber.
So Lieutenant Garber is played by Walter Matthau, and if you guys remember Walter Matthau, he's played on a lot of things and really leaned into comedy heavily in his later careers, like Grumpy Old Man and some other roles. But in this role, he's kind of a serious cop. He's with the transit authority, and we really get introduced to him in this movie where he's taking a group of Japanese subway personnel from Japan on a tour, and he believes they can't speak any English, and it's pretty hilarious what happens. This whole emergency starts to happen, and so things get really stressful, and he has to get rid of them, and it's a funny little bit of sort of view into this guy's kind of...
He was just the most unimpressed man by everything.
Yes, yeah, he was just like... But he's just... This is really, in my opinion, one of the best Walter Matthau roles I've seen him in, because he's really very good. Now, don't get me wrong, he's hilarious in Grumpy Old Man. I mean, those are great films, and he's got real comedic timing. And you see little tiny bits of it in this film, which is really key.
Oh yeah,
a wonderful job by Walter Matthau in this, and he's literally in virtually the first scene to the last scene, and the last scene's amazing.
Have you seen The Bad News Bears?
Yes, I have. He was in that too.
That's one we should. I have never seen Bad News Bears, and I know that's a '70s film, and yeah. I just so enjoyed Walter Matthau.
We should
in this
definitely
film
do it.
that I'd like to see it.
That is a funny movie.
There was maybe 3 other roles in the 70s where he wasn't playing a comedic role, and my understanding is that he had heart trouble, and after maybe it was after Pelham 1, 2, 3, they said you can't be so strenuous, so go back and do more of the comedic roles.
Well, I'm sad to hear about his health issues, but I'm not sad that he did these comedic roles, because he's really, well, it's just my type of humor, so it may not be everybody's cup of tea, but it is definitely mine. So I was excited to see him in this film and see what a great job he did. So yeah, wonderful.
Okay, so Matt, I have to apologize. I did not pull out the actual character names for the 4 gunmen who take over the train. I just call them by their code names. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was Mr. Blue, played by Robert Shaw. And the last time we saw him was on Black Sunday. Was he better cast in this film?
Yeah, I think so. You know what? I don't really like. I don't really like Black Sunday, so
I remember. Maybe that was a softball question, but you remember my problem with him in Black Sunday was more of he was supposed to be an Israeli Mossad agent, but this British accent kept pushing back through, and I never really quite bought Robert Shaw as that character. But in this one, he plays like he was like a
mercenary.
Thank you. And so he plays Mr. Blue. Then we also had Mr. Green.
Before we move off Mr. Blue, I think it's pretty clear from the get-go that Mr. Blue is the brains behind this operation. It's his operation that he's put together. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, very much so. And I found it very funny that his weapon was concealed in a trombone case. So I play trombone.
They were funny. They all came in with this trombone case. There was it looked like a box for flowers. The funniest part is a couple of the boxes were really long, and then they pull out these little tiny submachine guns.
Yeah, yeah. Some of them, they didn't look like they would work. The trombone, maybe I would believe, but the box of flowers, not so much.
Yeah, it was funny. But they got their names, Mr. Blue, Mr. Green, Mr. Gray, Mr. Brown, based on the color of their hats.
That is right.
Yeah, and that's a cool thing. You actually told me, so,
Yeah, nah. Well,
but it's a cool thing to now know. Like the color red on, was it on the
Don't Look Now or
no? That too. But the color red in that one where
The Sixth Sense.
The Sixth Sense, yeah. But anyway, it's cool to then rewatch. I'm actually going to go back and rewatch and go, oh, okay, there it is. But Robert Shaw, amazing actor. And just real quick about Robert Shaw.
Sure.
In this movie, he does great. I think he does a great job. He plays the brains behind this. He's very focused. He provides a lot of the tension with the hostages, and you can tell through the way he's acting is like when he says these people are going to be killed one at a time, you believe it, right?
Yeah.
Everybody else is kind of like, like maybe we should give him more time, and he's this Mr. Blue, nope. And I think that leads us into talking about some of the other guys, if you want to talk about Mr. Green.
Mr. Green was played by Martin Balsam, and his character was kind of key to the whole thing because he was a former motorman for the subway system. He knew how to disconnect the car. He knew how to drive it forward. So he was clutch to the whole thing. Unfortunately, though, for him, that day he woke up with a very bad sinus infection.
Which turns out to be pivotal, but interesting. But the other part about what Mr. Green brought to the table was a whole knowledge of how operations happened.
Right.
And where, so really, somehow Mr. Blue and Mr. Green crossed paths, and I think between them, Mr. Blue put together a plan, Mr. Green gave the details, but we see Martin Balsam is an actor that appears in a number of other things after the taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. Do you recall what he?
Well, I will tell you where I recognized him from because I'm a big fan of the movie Psycho.
Oh.
And I don't know if you remember in the film, there was a detective, Milton Arbogast, who mother comes out and,
And that was Martin Balsam?
That was Martin Balsam. Balsam also won a BAFTA for the role of Mr. Green.
Did he? Oh, yeah.
Yep.
It was good. He did a good job. I think, to be honest with you, the next one was my favorite Easter egg of this movie was Mr. Gray, played by Hector Elizondo. And Hector Elizondo goes on to play the kindly concierge in Pretty Woman and the kindly butler assistant in The Princess Diaries. He's a very warm character in those scenes. In this movie, he is not warm. He's kind of a not nice person and a little bit on the edge, and also not great taking orders.
So what I liked about the four hijackers is that they were a well-oiled machine, right? They were very efficient, as we were talking about earlier. but Mr. Gray is kind of the loose cannon. And I think we learn a little bit about him just in some dialogue where they say, he was actually kicked out of the mafia.
But I think in the movie they use a few techniques to make us, the witnesses of this, not like him. He's very rude to a young lady. He's clearly not nice to the woman with the children, and we just don't like him in this.
Right off the bat, he is the one that you don't like. I know Hector Elizondo from the films you mentioned, but more recently, he was on the Tim Allen sitcom Last Man Standing.
That's right. He was on that, and he's great in that as well. Yeah, he's a good
he's a nice guy in that one as well.
Yeah, he really switched to playing nice guys after this role, because this role he was not a nice guy, and virtually all the other roles he really warmed up. And I mean, I enjoyed seeing him as a young actor. Yeah, no,
right.
He was great to see.
He was good. Hey, speaking of Tim Allen sitcoms, I don't know if you recognize the actor playing Mr. Brown was Earl Hindman, who played Tim Allen's neighbor Wilson on Home Improvement.
That's so funny. I did recognize the name Earl Hindman. I was like, wait a minute, I know that name. So that's funny when it all came together. So that's yet another one of those Easter eggs that I really enjoy. I hadn't seen this movie, and even if I had seen it, I would not have put those things together until I actually watched it. So that was another enjoyable.
I'm not sure if I'd ever seen Earl Hindman outside of Home Improvement. What was always funny about their advertisement is that they always leaned in to this idea of not showing his face. So even in photographs for publicity, he would always have like a miniature fence that he would hold in front of his face.
It was a great shtick, and it was great that they kept using it. And I enjoyed that show. Was really funny, and Earl Hindman was great in it. Always great. It's like he's got that great voice, and he's always handing out those pearls of wisdom. And another one that made me laugh as soon as I saw it is Lieutenant Patron. And I was talking to you saying, I just know this name. I think it was in Seinfeld or something. And you immediately went, it's Jerry Stiller.
Yeah. We're going to stick in the TV land right now. So Jerry Stiller was the actor who played Frank Costanza, who gave us Festivus on the Seinfeld show. And I thought he was even better in King of Queens, where he played the father, Arthur Spooner.
He was great as Arthur in that show. He was always there's so many funny scenes that he has in that show.
I have a question for you. Did you see the episode where Doug, played by Kevin James, learns that Arthur used to be an actor?
You're kidding. No, I have not seen that, but that is hilarious. And just please tell me that they actually use scenes from this movie.
They used scenes from this film. It was him as Rico Patron. Now, I remember this because his hair obviously is much longer because he's a younger man in this film. I always thought that was Jerry Stiller filmed at the time of King of Queens, but they just put like a wig on him or something to make him look younger. I had no idea that it was from Pelham 1, 2, 3.
That is so funny. That is just, I love this stuff. This is literally the high point of doing this podcast, is to find out these funny tie-ins and associations. And obviously we will at some point forward go and we'll do our tie-in to Star Trek. And I'm waiting with bated breath to figure out what the tie-in is.
I have one, but let's keep with our last TV. So I had the same experience with the actress who played the mayor's wife. Mm-hmm. I heard her voice, I recognized it, but I eventually had to go and look it up, and she was played by none other than Doris Roberts, who you'll remember as Marie Barone on the long-running Everybody Loves Raymond show.
That one slipped by me, but that is hilarious. And now that I'm thinking about it, one, I'm going to go back and watch the scenes with her in it, because all the scenes with the mayor's wife are pretty funny, and a significant send-up of the sitting mayor of New York City at the time as being an ineffectual rube, and his wife really being the smartest person in the room, is pretty funny. And the fact that it's Doris Roberts, who much later in her career as a senior delivered such a wonderful portrayal as Ray's mom, and the foil to which Ray's wife had to work with, is really one of the most endearing parts of that show, was the mother-in-law-wife interaction.
We've talked about 4 or 5 really great TV shows. We've talked about Last Man Standing, Home Improvement, Seinfeld, King of Queens, and Everybody Loves Raymond. That's 5. That's 5 classic television programs that are going to come in the future for these, and we're getting to see these actors prior to us knowing them so well from that. In our last episode, Aaron Mullinex had joined me, and we talked about Superfly. And one of the characters in that movie, his name was Scatter, and he was played by Julius Harris, who played Inspector Daniel.
Right. He appears in the film a couple of times earlier on because he's commanding the New York City cop force, right?
Right.
And I will also want to call this out, is that it was not insignificant that this very high-ranking police officer was African-American. So it was kind of a big deal, a good step in the right direction at the time.
Well, let's go ahead and step behind the scenes. This film was produced by Palomar Pictures, and it was distributed by United Artists. It was released on October 2nd, 1974. It had a budget of around $3.7 million or $5 million. I found a couple of numbers for this, but we're back into high-budget movies for the 70s. And looking over on Rotten Tomatoes, this one has a 98% on the tomato meter. And with the audience, the popcorn meter, they're giving it an 88%. The movie was directed by Joseph Sargent, who is also a television director, and he is our Star Trek connection. He directed The Corbomite Maneuver, which was the first episode produced after the pilots. But also, Joseph Sargent directed Jaws. No, not the Jaws, but Jaws or The Revenge in 1987, possibly the worst of the Jaws films.
Might be the worst movie ever made.
Matt, Jaws 4 supports your whole reason why you don't like sequels.
Yeah, that's funny. And I think I read something where he actually got this award that year for literally the worst directing job.
But Pelham 1, 2, 3?
Yeah.
He knocked it out of the park.
Very tight.
This one.
Very tight.
So you had let me know that this was based on a book by John Goody. Actually, the rights were secured prior to the novel being published for the equivalent of $3.38 million in today's money.
But when you look at the movie, you realize that the source material was amazing. And I think one of the other things you always see if you look up this movie is that it's not based on a real hijacking. It's based on a novel. And I think there's a lot of push from the New York Transit Authority to basically say this didn't really happen.
Did you know that the MTA actually refused them the right to be able to film inside the subway system? It wasn't until the mayor intervened, but they did require United Artists to buy an anti-hijacking insurance at the cost of about $75,000, in addition to paying $275,000 just for the use of the subway.
The other interesting fact was that they made them use subway cars with no graffiti on them.
That was part of the agreement with the MTA, is that they had to use cars that had been cleaned.
Right.
So that they look good. They didn't want to encourage more graffiti.
Or encourage the graffiti artist that was featured in the movie.
That makes much more sense than what I said.
Yeah. Clearly, the subway and the subway system is very important in this movie, and you learn a ton about how the whole system's run. But the action and the interaction of the characters and the police working on one side and the hijackers and the hostages on the other side is really where all of the interesting action is taking place. Certainly the subway and the subway car is a backdrop, and to some extent, an interesting part of the whole thing, because obviously you go to those scenes where they show the giant board with the glowing lights and the cars stopping or the cars moving fast. All very interesting, but not nearly as important as the human interactions, in my opinion.
I think being able to actually use the subways, it brings that realism. You felt like, okay, this is the subway. Do you remember in French Connection, they had that whole on and off again sequence in the subway with Frog One?
Yeah, where they're getting on, getting off.
That was all filmed without permits, and it really made it convincing. Hey, this feels like it's taking place in a real location, and I think it brought the same realism to Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I agree.
Speaking of the French Connection, the cinematographer was Owen Rosamond, who also did the French Connection. And finally, David Shire wrote the score. This was the same year that he wrote the score for The Conversation.
Wow.
He won a BAFTA for this film. And this score is mentioned as one of the best scores of the 70s. Andy Trudeau, an NPR music expert on film, put this in his top 10 film scores of all time. I thought the music was great right from the very beginning.
Yeah, when I was watching the film, I definitely was like, I know Chuck's going to have a lot to say about this one because this is good. And when I say it's good, it means it was probably very, very good because I'm a little more dense to that side of the equation. But it really served the movie. I can't say enough good things about this movie.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of disjoint acting that has to take place because clearly they're not in the same room. It's very hard to do. These people are talking on a radio, and there's all this chaos going behind. I thought that was amazing because that was probably 100% realistic because in a lot of other movies, you see everybody be perfectly silent. This stoppage of the train has caused a huge snafu in the transit authority, and they're putting people on buses to get around to. It's chaos in there, and then they're trying to talk on the radio to the hijackers. It's crazy.
Let's get into this a little bit more. The whole setup for this film starts with the hijackers getting onto the train one by one at different stations until Mr. Blue, who's the mastermind, he's the last one to get on and has the motorman open the door to let Mr. Green get into the train. And then from there on out, it just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. What was their demand?
Just $1 million in 1 hour.
That was it right there. And you said earlier that Mr. Blue was just unrelenting. There's a scene where he's talking with Garber, and Garber says, you keep saying 49 minutes are left. That doesn't make it any easier. And then Mr. Blue says, 48 minutes.
And also, Mr. Blue at one point points out, it's like, if we gave them 2 hours, they'd take 2 hours.
Yeah, you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile.
Yeah,
so we laughed today at $1 million, but what did they have to do to try to get that?
I actually thought quite a bit about this $1 million. Here's my thing on that. You realize that you've got these hijackers, and there's 4 of them. They can only carry so many packs of money. And if you realize when they make the demand for the $1 million, then he gives them the directions, and they has to be hundreds and 50s in a very specific half hundreds, half 50s, rubber banded together. And the reason was they had put together these vests that each person could carry so many of these. So it basically, with the 4 people, they could carry all the money evenly distributed amongst them in these vests. So to me, if they had asked for $2 million, they would have had to left $2 million behind. $1 million behind. It could only carry essentially $1 million.
They each had the exact same disguise because they wanted all the witnesses. How are they going to describe them?
Yeah.
Oh, they were wearing thick glasses, fake mustaches, hats, and
trench coats.
A trench coat.
Yeah.
Part of that design was so that they could dispose of the hats, or they could dispose of the glasses or the mustache. They could turn the coats inside out, and then they could all 4 go in separate directions, right? I thought something that was really smart was that very early on, Garber figures out that one of the hijackers has to be a motorman.
Yes. Oh, sure. Yeah. He knows right away.
You and I have covered different films where the setup, maybe it had some flaws. So, for example, on the Poseidon Adventure, why would people stay put if they know that they need to get to the bottom of the upside down boat? Or Black Sunday. But for this film, I just did not have that sense of, yeah, but when I was watching it.
No, I think, I totally agree. I think that's what might have worried the MTA a little bit, is it seemed very plausible the way they were going to handle it. And obviously hijacking a subway train is a ludicrous idea. They did talk a lot about that dead man switch because they talked about how are they going to get away, what are they going to do.
The question that I keep asking myself is, how are they going to get away?
That is the other reason that some of those boxes were inordinately long, as I recall now, because when they were just pulling the guns out of them, I was like, this is ridiculous. Why is that box so long? And then you realize later on in the movie, okay, they've got some other stuff in those boxes to be able to maybe thwart that dead man switch and affect their escape in some manner. We see some of that, but the cool thing in this movie is we're really not let in on what their entire plan is, because Mr. Blue and the other hijackers are very tight-lipped. They're not telling the hostages what's going on. They're being very tight. And it's great to be watcher of the movie, because you're in the dark just like everybody else is.
Thank you for bringing that up, because, at first, Mr. Blue's demand is for the $1 million. They get the release of the money, and then the next hurdle is the very specificity of how the bills have to be bundled and the denominations, because it's all been planned out. And, you still have to get it to the subway station and then through the tunnel to the train before the deadline. Otherwise, they're going to start killing the passengers one by one every minute.
Well, and if there's a race to get that money to the station and then to go on foot to get that money to the car. And it clearly they aren't going to make it. So there has to be some kind of negotiation or some kind of something done. And I think it's important to realize in the movie that you'll see what they do, and it's a key turning point in terms of how Garber and Mr. Blue are interacting. And essentially it's the first time that everything isn't being absolutely directed by Mr. Blue. They have the money, it's in the bundles, it's in the bag. They're driving all the way across New York City, and they're on the radio, and they're saying, it's on the way, you'll be there, shortly. And Garber finally gets the notion, he's like, they have no idea where the car is. He gets on the radio and says, it's in the station. We have it in the station, and it wasn't in the station. Can you just give us that? It's in the station. We have to walk it down to you. Knowing full well the car had gotten into a wreck. They weren't going to make it to the station, but they didn't know it. They didn't have any way of getting information that they weren't giving them. That's the first time that Garber is able to sort of manipulate Mr. Blue in a positive way to make things work. And that's when you also, in my opinion, part of the story, his request for the motorman that had been dismissed starts to bear fruit and all these other things. So all of those actions he's taken beforehand to get the ball rolling on is starting to come together, and he realizes that they don't have any view to the surface.
Of the outside.
So they know what's going on. They're only dependent on him saying stuff, which is a key turning point, in my opinion.
That actually becomes a plot point in the Tony Scott version of Pelham 1, 2, 3 with John Travolta and Denzel Washington. Tony Scott, he was the director of Top Gun, Days of Thunder. So this came out after 9/11. We're still tender with hijackings, and it plays into that fear. They did change the motivations of the Mr. Blue character, who was played by John Travolta, and they also had access to people who were filming on the street. So they did have some knowledge of the outside world and what was happening. And they played into that a little bit, and they weren't able to get around it. I don't know if you watched it. It is good in that it's nearly the same story, but it's just a different style. I don't think it's as good. It is very high energy, and it is entertaining. And I think when I finished it, I was like, holy cow! I was really afraid of John Travolta, who I still recall as, Vinnie Barbarino from Welcome Back, Kotter.
Yeah. No, I didn't actually watch it. I will say, though, that one of the commentaries I saw was one of the differences is in the original, there a lot of everything is driven through, actor interaction and nuance, and the newer one was definitely much more of a big action thriller type movie.
It's definitely a popcorn movie. So no doubt.
Yeah.
Did we want to talk about the mayor?
I just think it's funny because the mayor in this film, the mayor's got a terrible cold, and one of the hijackers has a terrible cold. No, there's no tie-in with that. It's just that time of year in New York City, but the mayor is laid up in bed and is totally, feckless and ineffective, and it was actually a send-up of the actual sitting mayor at the time, which is pretty funny because it was the actual sitting mayor at the time that basically forced the MTA to allow them to make this film.
To make the film.
So a little bit of here's mud in your eye, I guess, or something. But anyway, it was just funny, and of course we talked already about the actress that played his wife. She did a great job. She's the smartest person in the room. and leads him into the correct decision on what he has to do, which is actually pay the money.
Because, as she said, he would at least have 18 votes.
Very cynical. $1 million and 18 votes.
Which is kind of funny, though. It's like, okay, you can do all of this, and at least you'll have 18 votes as opposed to...
18 sure votes.
Sure votes, yeah.
That was funny, yeah. Though I think that was definitely, again, if you've listened to this podcast at this point, you realize that we were very pleased with this film. So I don't think there's going to be any surprise about what we're gonna come up with. But
why don't we go ahead and ask the question?
Sure.
So Matt, did the taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 groove through the decades or lose a beat?
I think it grooved through the decades, and in some ways it grooved even better through the decades based on the continuing careers of the actors that appeared in this film. It's just so fun to look at this film, a great film, and see these actors. They're not huge parts, but they're definitely parts and they're not the stars. They went on to have amazing careers, really, and interesting tie-ins.
I really like the film, and I agree with you. I believe that it does groove. The film looks great. It's such a smart, efficient screenplay. The thing I didn't like about the Tony Scott version of it is it lost a little bit of its reality just because of the way in which modern movies can sometimes just be edited with all the quick cuts, So this film, it unfolded for you. I loved the ending. I think they set everything up in the film so that when you do get to the ending, you go, yes. I think it inspired films like Speed. Definitely it had an influence on Quentin Tarantino with Reservoir Dogs because of the color coding symbols. And I'm going to forgive the director for Jaws 4 because this film is really, really good. I mean, everybody, even Michael Caine did Jaws 4 just for the money. So, hey, I'm not going to hold that against them. There's been 2 remakes. There was a television remake, and then there was the 2009 Tony Scott. But I think only the original has that grit and edge, and only in New York style of energy. We didn't even talk about the 18 passengers because each one of them, when you look at the credits, they have like the banker, it's the mother, and that's the names that they give them. And also too, stay through the credits because there's a couple of title cards thanking certain people for helping filming and also acknowledging that the MTA did not help them at all.
I definitely recommend, if you listen to this podcast and you got this far, get a hold of it somehow and watch it. You won't regret it.
Did we have anything else that we want? Or
no, that's it. Let's wrap it.
That wraps up our ride on this episode of the Cinematic Flashback. Matt, again, great getting back together after both of our travels the past couple of weeks. So let us know if you've watched The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 and what you thought about. I do want to let you know that at our website, thecinematicflashback.com, you can reach out to us. You can leave a review there and start up a conversation with us. And please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. The best way you can share this show is to continue recommending us. And we just deeply appreciate the feedback that we're getting on Facebook. So just keep it coming our way. We really do appreciate it. So join us next time as we take the Wayback Machine to the 70s to explore another film from that decade. And until then, mind the gap, tip your motorman, and if someone says Gesundheit, maybe check the closet first.